He pulled out a handful after handful of every sort of gold coin. There was a rose noble of Edward the Fourth, double sovereigns of Henry the Eighth, triple sovereigns and gold crowns of Edward the Sixth, double royals, rials and angles of Mary, rose royals, spur royals, angles, large sovereigns and laurels of James the First, double rials and rials of Elizabeth, £3 pieces, broads and half broads of Charles the First, some in greater quantity and some in less, but all were represented. Handful after handful did he pull out, and yet the bottom was not reached. At last he came to it. The layer of gold pieces was about 30 inches thick by 3 feet 6 long. "We must get this into the house, George, before any one is about," gasped the Colonel. "Yes, sir, yes. But how are we going to carry it?" Harold thought for a minute and then acted thus. Bidding George stay in the vault with the treasure, which he was with difficulty persuaded to do, he climbed the improvised rope ladder and got in safety through the hole. In his excitement he had forgotten about the summer house having been carried away by the gale, which was still blowing, though with not so much fury as before, and the wind-swept desolation that met his view as he emerged into the dawning light broke upon him with a shock. The summer house was clean gone, nothing but a few uprights remained of it, and 50 yards away he thought he could make out the crumpled up shape of the roof. Nor was that all. Quite a quarter of the great oaks, which were the glory of the place, were down or splintered and ruined. But what did he care for the summer house or the oaks now? Forgetting his exhaustion, he ran down the slope and reached the house, which he entered as softly as he could by the side door. Nobody was about yet, or would be for another hour. It was Christmas Day, and not a pleasant morning to get up on, so the servants would be sure to lie abed. On his way to his bedroom he peeped into the dining room, where he had fallen asleep on the previous evening. When he had woke up, it may be remembered, he lit a candle. This candle was now flaring itself to death, for he had forgotten to extinguish it, and by its side laid the paper from which he had made the great discovery. There was nothing in it, of course, but somehow the sight impressed him very much. It seemed months since he awoke to find the lamp gone out. How much may happen between the lighting of a candle and its burning away. Smiling at this trite reflection, he blew that light out, and taking another, went to his room. Here he found a stout handbag, with which he made haste to return to the Mount. "Are you all right, George?" he shouted down the hole. "Well, Colonel, yes, but not sorry to see you back. It's lonesome like down here with these deaders." "Very well, look out. There's a bag. Put as much gold in it as you can lift comfortably, and then make it fast to the rope." Some 3 minutes passed, and then George announced that the bag full of gold was ready. Harold hauled away, and with a considerable effort brought it to the surface. Then, getting the bag onto his shoulder, he staggered off with it to the house. In his room stood a massive sea-going chest, the companion of his many wanderings. It was about half full of uniforms and old clothes, which he bundled unceremoniously to the floor. This done, he shot the bag full of shining gold, as bright and uncorrupted now as when it was packed away 2.5 centuries ago, into the chest, and returned for another load. 20 times did he make this journey. At the 10th something happened. "Here's a writing, sir, with this lot," shouted George. "It was packed away in the money." He took the writing, or rather parchment, out of the mouth of the bag and put it in his pocket unread. At last the store, enormous as it was exhausted. "That's the lot, sir," shouted George, as he sent up the 20th bagful. "If you'll kindly let down that there rope, I'll come up too." "All right," said the Colonel. "Put the skeleton back first." "Well, sir," answered George, "he looks wonderful comfortable where he lay, he do, so if you're agreeable I think I'll let him be." Harold chuckled, and presently George arrived, covered with filth and perspiration. "Well, sir," he said, "I never did think that I should get dead tired of handling gold coins, but there's a rum world, and that's a fact. Well, I niver, and the summer house gone, and just look at them there oaks. Well, if that bean't a master one." "You never saw a masterer, that's what you were going to say, wasn't it? Well, and take one thing with another, nor did I, George, if that's any comfort to you. Now look here, just cover over this hole with some boards and earth, and then come in and get some breakfast. It's 8 o'clock and past, and the gale is blowing itself out. A Merry Christmas to you, George," and he held out his hand covered with cuts and grime and blood. George shook it. "Same to you, Colonel, I'm sure, and a Merry Christmas it is. God bless you, sir, for what you've done tonight. You've saved the old place from that banker chap, that's what you've done, and you'll have Miss Ida, and I'm darn glad on it, that I am. Lord, won't this make the Squire open his eyes?" And the honest fellow brushed away a tear and fairly capered with joy, his red nightcap waving on the breeze. It was a strange and beautiful sight to see that solemn George capering thus in the midst of that windy desolation. Harold was too moved to answer, so he shouldered his last load of treasure and limped off with it to the house. Mrs. Jobson and her talkative niece were up now, but they did not happen to see him, and he reached his room in safety. He poured the last bagful of gold into the chest and smoothed it down. It filled it to the brim. He shut the chest and locked it, and then, as he was covered with filth and grime, bruised and bleeding, and his hair flying wildly about his face, he sat down upon it, and from his heart thanked heaven for the wonderful thing that had happened to him. So exhausted was he that he nearly fell asleep as he sat, but remembering himself, he rose, and taking the parchment from his pocket, he cut the faded silk with which it was tied and opened it. On it was a short inscription in the same crabbed writing which he had seen in the old Bible that Ida had found. It ran as follows: "Seeing that the times be so troublous that no man can be sure of his own, I, Sir James de la Molle, have brought together all my substance in money from wheresoever it lay at interest, and have hid the same in this sepulchre, to which I found the entry by a chance, till such time as peace come back to this unhappy England. This I have done on Christmas Day in the year of our Lord 1643, having completed the hiding of the gold while the great gale was blowing. James de la Molle." Thus, on a long gone Christmas Day, in the hour of a great wind, was the gold hid, and now on this Christmas Day, when another great wind raged overhead, was it found once more, just in time to save a daughter of the house of de la Molle from a fate as bad as death. End of chapter 41.